Welcome to this edition of Silver Sneakers Boom Muscle. If you've been following me, you know I've been engaged in the new activity, the sport of powerlifting, for a couple of months now. And so far I'm quite happy with my progress in the deadlift and the squat. I can even get the bar behind my neck for the first time in many years, and working on technique, getting that full range of motion to get my hips below my knee to qualify for a legitimate lift, and slowly increasing the weight. However, quite disappointed in my lack of progress in the bench press. The real problem with the bench press is I know I've got some torn muscles that have been scarred down or just detached from the bones in my shoulders and in my chest from a lifetime of activity. And as we age, you know, we're susceptible to sarcopenia, loss of muscle power, tendonitis, which can weaken the tendons, allow them to rupture, and just general conditioning. There's a couple books, I'm going to cite them in my description of this exercise, that try to address this issue, and one is called Weightlifting is a Waste of Time, and the other one has to do with isometrics. So part of the problem is trying to identify where I am specifically weak. I've shown this in a couple more videos, particularly with a shoulder press, which is really, I think, about the only exercise that's missing from the powerlifting routine that to make it a complete full body routine, adding some shoulder press, and then maybe some true pulls. But other than that, I'm going to demonstrate some ways I'm trying to figure out where my specific weaknesses are as far as the chest press, and see if I can work on remediating those. Of course, a person could always make an appointment to see a neurologist or a physiatrist, rehab medicine specialist, physical therapist. They have devices that can measure the electrical activity of muscles that are being engaged. So I may ultimately do that, but initially I'm going to work on this on my own. So if you look in the mirror and you flex, you might be able to identify defects in your musculature, to identify which muscles might be out. I'm not going to demonstrate that, but if I just flex my chest and feel, compare side to side, see where I have muscles, see where I don't seem to have muscles, to identify that. Bicep, you can do this and see your little Popeye arm. It's like, okay, I'm missing part of the bicep there, missing part of the bicep there. Chest press involves the chest, primarily I think for the lift-off, pushing at the first few degrees. Then it shifts over into the arms, triceps for extending, but also important to have strong biceps, particularly as you're lowering this. This is an eccentric move that's going to require both work in the bicep and the tricep and the chest. Often eccentric weightlifting is more important than the concentric part. And it's important to work on that instead of just lowering the weight quickly, that you actually power it down. Work on those muscles. To assess the lift-off phase, which is from the chest up on the bench press, I've set up a Smith machine and set these locks which prevent the bar from going any lower. Checked it so that it stops just at my chest. So in case I can't lift the weight, I can crawl out from underneath without no risk. So I've warmed up doing some modest activity. For me, that's going around the fitness facility and wiping down the surfaces in the bathrooms, removing weights that have been left around, just sort of tidying stuff up. I'm not an employee of this, but when I'm here, I just like it to look neat, makes me feel good about my exercise, and hopefully for other patrons, make them feel welcome. So I'm going to do basically a couple lifts with this weight to see how it feels coming off my chest area and see where my strength is or where my deficiencies are. So I have the bar sort of right at my forehead, and then when it comes down, it's going to lie right across my chest. I'm going to take a deep breath, brace in my core, put my feet tight into the floor, contract every muscle in my body, and work on the edges. So right here, I got it right at the center of the chest. It's resting on the supports. See my hands? I'm safe at this point, and this is the lift-off position. Brace. So at this point, I'm confident I can move the weight from my initial chest area, at least on the initial lift off. So I'm going to increase the weight and continue with this routine until I come to a point where I can no longer accomplish that. So I'm just trying to diagnose the issue, not taking a lot of rest between each cycle, because even if my muscles get a little tired, it's going to accomplish my goal, which is to identify my sticking points or my specific weakness. Okay, again for push-off. So that felt pretty close to my max for right off the chest. So I'm going to bring the what do they call this? Up a notch to see if I can, how it feels lifting it off from being about 4 inches above my chest. I'm going to pause the tape, take a couple minutes of rest, so I get a full effort on this next attempt. I'll increase the weight a bit, because I know that on that previous weight I can get that off my chest and up to a full press. This one will be where I'm still using chest muscles, but the tricep starts to kick in, because when it's way back here, not much the tricep's going to do. But as your arm gets into about a 90 degree, the tricep will kick in. The other muscles that are involved are your latissimus dorsi and your back muscles, which are also extending the arm. So I'm going to lower the weight. So you can see there's about 4 or 5 inches above the chest. Let me get it in the right position. Hands comfortably apart. See my elbows are just about 90 degrees here. underneath that. Okay. Felt pretty good. So we even with increased weight. At this point, I feel that's not my sticking point. So I'm going to bring the, gonna have to lift it a bit. So this will be my final assessment. I've elevated the supports so that it will only drop about 6 or so inches from max. So significantly up off my chest, about 8 inches up, to see if I can lift this weight. Again, identify if my weakest problem is on the final push to the lockout position in the bench press. This again relying primarily on the triceps and the back muscles like that latissimus dorsi. So we'll see if I can get this one at least pushed up, and then we'll discuss what I need to work on. So weights set. So no problem at that one. So to conclude, for me, I seem to have the most difficulty with the bar right on my chest. So my initial pressing position from there, which again is primarily my chest muscles. So let's work on those. 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. It's 200 pounds on that. For the next part of this video, I've relocated to my home gym because I have some equipment that's not available at my regular exercise fitness location. It's maybe not quite as modern or cozy, but it serves its purpose. For a home gym, I'd recommend having one of these lifting racks. Because if you don't have a spotter, you want to have a good, strong situation to prevent, if you lose control of the weights, that you don't get hurt. And you can invest in equipment. You can often find it at discount prices in secondhand stores, places like that. It lasts a lifetime. If you think of it as a good investment, for me, I hope one of my kids will want to inherit it when I'm done. A couple of things about bench press is how far apart should your hands be. You'll see some really strong professionals essentially with a very wide grip, and that works for them. Most exercise scientists think the most important benefit of the very wide grip is it has a shorter distance that you're actually moving the weight. For most other people, a narrower grip is probably most appropriate. Some exercise specialists think that you can actually measure what is probably your ideal distance to hold the bar apart. And this is by finding your acromial to acromial distance. The acromion is part of the shoulder blade. It's the bone that comes over the shoulder, connects to the collarbone or clavicle. So one way to find it is to feel along your collarbone to the end of it. And there's a little joint there, and that's your acromioclavicular joint. If you've ever separated your shoulders, you'll have a nice divot there. You can take a tape measure and measure from one acromion to the other, which, due to lack of flexibility, I can't do. So I measure from one acromion to the notch in my sternum right here, and then double it. That would be my acromio to acromioclavicular distance. So for me, that ends up right at about 14. And to calculate the distance where to best put my hands is going to be that distance, acromio to acromio, times 1.5, 1.5. So 14, 28, plus half of that, another 14. It's going to be 38, 42. So I can take my tape measure and measure on the bar. So for this setup, it's pretty wide along here. The other way to think of it is maybe your hands being just right above your shoulders. But you're certainly free to try different distances for your hands and find what you think works best. So I'm going to see how this works. I found that if I put my thumbs together in the middle of the bar, spread them out one more time, and that's where I grip. That's my most comfortable position, because you'll find that bars have different distances between the racks themselves, and they'll have little maybe lines on the bar, but there's no consistency, so you really can't go by those. And so for warm-up, go in the center, one distance, another distance, brace. Earlier in the video, I showed you on the Smith machine how to identify sort of your weakest point, the sticking point, or where you might want to work primarily to get stronger at the full bench press. Another important concept in exercise science is called variable resistance, where instead of moving a specific weight through a range of motion, you have some way to alter the weight so that the weakest parts are moving the lightest weight, and your strongest part of the movement is lifting a heavier weight. Let's say with your bench press, your weakest part can only lift 100 pounds. But your strongest part, like in that Smith machine demonstration, almost double that. So it's a waste of time to lift that 100 pounds in my strong part. That's not really exercising those muscles to get the most increase in strength. So one concept is to have a device, something you can do to increase the resistance as you're going through your range of motion. Here I have a stack of tire chains. Each one weighs 40 pounds, so I'm going to place these on the bar. So I've set it up so I have the chain hanging down to where just the bottom part just touches the floor. So as I lower the weight, more and more of the chain will rest on the floor, which effectively lightens the load that I'm trying to lift. So let's go ahead and see how this works. Okay, let's see. Wish me luck. quite effective. I can increase the load, again just adding normal plates, or put the plate in first and then the chain. If you have a gym fitness facility that has chains, that's one way to vary the resistance through the range of motion. Another way to vary the resistance is to use an elastic band to support to the bar. Then as you lower it, you'll stretch the band, and that'll take some of the weight off of the bar. In this case, I've just used an attachment, a Velcro type strap, to bring this elastic band to the bar. I think that's easier than trying to unload it from one end. But depending on your situation, you can troubleshoot, find a different way to do this. So now I'm going to demonstrate my bench press with my elastic strap. I think that's a very effective method to use that variable resistance. Another concept in gaining strength and musculature is instability. In Silver Sneakers, we have a whole course, a whole format called stability. But making things less stable requires more activation, really, of your entire body. So you'll see when people are trying to get their legs stronger, if they focus on using the machines like the leg press or so, they might gain some amount of strength, although it's often pretty frustrating. But on the other hand, people can move quite a bit of weight with those machines compared to, let's say, doing a squat or a deadlift. But what they found in studies, the amount of strength you gain is much, much higher during the squat and the deadlift, even though the weight you're moving can be significantly less. And the rationale behind that is both those exercises require full body engagement, that you're not resting against a support. The only thing supporting you are your feet and everything involved to the top of your head. So to strengthen my chest, to improve myself on bench press, plus these other lifts, I'm going to demonstrate some ways to do exercises for the chest that rely on some instability as well as muscle contraction. First, I'm going to take a stability ball, hold it up chest high, and just do an isometric press inward and hold for about 20 seconds. You might ask, where's the instability? Well, because the ball, as I push harder against it, is pushing harder back towards me, I'm feeling quite a bit of instability in my chest. These balls are very good for providing instability for any of your exercises. Next, I'm going to grab a Bosu. One of these half domes, and going to work on some different push-up type exercises. The push-up is a really good exercise. It requires stabilization of the entire core. Very good for your shoulders, chest, and arms. I find if I do too many, I start to get tendonitis in my elbows, and I have wrist issues, so I have to try and keep my wrist neutral and limit the number of repetitions. So how to most benefit from the push-up, there's sort of two strategies. One is to do a partial push-up, where I'm only pushing from chest low to a few inches up, which is again maximizing the contractions of the chest and minimizing the activity of the tricep, biceps, and forearms. So that's one way to do it, and also by adding instability. So the Bosu, I have the round part towards the floor. I'm going to use that as hold my wrist neutral and just do partial push-ups. This raises another issue, is what position should I have my arms doing push-ups, which maximizes chest and improvement for bench press. The experts in the field think your elbow should be pretty close to your sides, somewhere between your arm being 30 degrees out to about 60 degrees out. Anything farther than 60 puts tremendous stress on the shoulders. The closer they are to your side, the more your triceps get involved, which can be a good thing. If you have weak triceps, you might want to work on that. But it also minimizes risk of injury. The other thing you can do in the same situation is, instead of doing the actual push-up, again, just go back to an isometric hold, basically a plank in a low push-up position. So you're contracting your chest, but also your entire core. And we'll do this and try and hold it for about 20 seconds. I find that to be a very challenging plank. Other options for this is, if you elevate your feet while doing the same exercises, you're going to hit different parts of the chest muscles. There's basically an upper, mid, and lower chest. So you might try elevating your feet, either putting them on a low platform, something to get a little bit of a down angle. Couple more exercises for the chest using dumbbells. A lot of times you'll see at a gym a pec deck, which is doing a fly on a platform. It's a good exercise for sure, but it's lacking the instability component. So similar exercise is to take dumbbells. You can lay flat and do a dumbbell fly. I find this quite risky for your shoulders. So what I like to do is called a cross, a low cross in particular. Dumbbells down by my sides, take them out a bit, and just bring them up towards my face. Try and squeeze at the top. An exercise similar to the bench press would be a mid-chest press. And this is best done with dumbbells. You can do a single or double. You put these in the middle of your chest and press upwards. And a similar exercise, but with, I think, additional benefits, is to do a mid-chest press while you're upright standing. Again, slow, contract all your chest muscles. Hope you enjoyed this little demonstration video on activities to work on strengthening your chest, bench press, and other activities. And I hope to see you again next time.